So today is the second session of our assessment summer camp. So welcome. Today's session is called Powering Up Soft Skills, Preparing Your Students for an International Workplace. And we'll be hearing from Stuart Connor and Bridget Hughes. Stuart is Pearson's Director of Qualifications and Assessment in Asia. He's based in Tokyo in Japan and working both with corporate clients and teaching institutions. Stuart leads the skills and language assessment strategy for Pearson across the region. Bridget is based in Italy. She's been with Pearson for over 20 years in roles from educational consultant to teacher trainer. In her current role as assessment manager, Bridget has developed an extensive network of 80 test centres across Italy and supports test centre admin and teaching staff through regular online training events. So just a little bit of quick housekeeping before we get started. We'll be having a short Q&A session towards the end of this webinar. So please feel free to submit your questions in the questions box or the chat box at any time during the talk. And we'll try to get through as many of those questions as possible at the end. Certificates of attendance will be sent to you in the days following this session. And finally, this webinar will be recorded and available shortly after the session in case you'd like to share it with colleagues or watch it again. And now I'm very happy to pass it over to Stuart and Bridget.
Good afternoon, welcome everyone.
Hi everyone. Right, yeah, so welcome everybody wherever you're from. It's great to have you here. I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all well in these crazy times we're living in. And it's very apt, the topic of this session, powering up soft skills. We're really talking about skills in the context of employability, and you know what we can do in these crazy times we're living in, what we can do in the field of English language education to help people towards jobs, better jobs, you know, hopefully great, rich, fulfilling careers, and ultimately, you know, happy lives. So we've got a really interesting session for you, I hope. And I'm just going to run through the order of play. So we'll start with a macro look at the latest in the skills debate and what employers and governments are saying and doing about skills, and especially the role that English plays in that. Then we're going to zoom in on some of the things we can do in the classroom and the practical steps that you can take to address the most in demand skills as an English language teacher. And we're going to showcase a few examples, and if we have time, some case studies of how you can use tools like Business Partner and the Versant tests to help you to do that effectively, to help you teach skills effectively. But first up, we'd like to just launch a quick poll, if Bridget, if you wouldn't mind. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your teaching background. There should be a question up on the screen in any second now. If you could let us know whether you're teaching in primary, if you're teaching in secondary, university, or adult, or if you're not teaching at all, that's fine too. Just let us know. So 30 seconds, off you go. You don't need to answer the other questions yet. We're still, like I said, figuring out how this thing called Zoom works. So just question one is fine.
Okay, answers coming in now. So quite a lot of primary, secondary, some university and some adult as well. Oh, it's still morphing back and forth. Maybe give it another couple of seconds, Stuart.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So just question one, tell us a little about yourself. Okay, so that's looking to be sort of a concentration around the secondary age learners and university and adults, let's say, on the whole, just so that you've got that picture, Stuart. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so so let's move on. I'm going to end the poll here. Okay, close that down. Okay, So the rescaling revolution, this is the context. So behind the skills debate are these enormous social, economic, technological transformations that are happening, that are impacting jobs and the skills required for those jobs. And according to the OECD, 1.1 billion jobs are likely to be radically transformed by technology within the next decade. Now, most forecasters will tell you that it's net positive. Don't worry, there'll be more jobs created than there will be jobs lost. But, that won't apply equally across industry sectors or job roles. So it's really kind of something to be thinking about. And in fact, the World Economic Forum predicts that nearly half of core skills for job roles are set to change by next year. And we all know that education systems are always playing catch up with industrial transformation, and they're just not able to adapt and respond quickly enough to this level of change. The speed of change, it's just getting faster and faster and faster. And that's widening these existing skills gaps that many commentators have been talking about for a long time. So in this context, just realized I didn't click through there. Yeah, there you go. There's the 50%. So in this context, what does it actually mean to be employable today? And what, according to employers, are the most necessary skills right now? So there's a recent survey. I don't know if you may have seen this. This is something that PricewaterhouseCoopers does every year. But a recent survey of global CEOs say that 79% are talking about the availability of key skills as the biggest business threat for them. And that's ahead of technological change. That's ahead of things like changing customer behaviors. And the level of concern, it varies obviously geographically. So actually where I'm based in Japan, it's significantly higher than this. It's usually, in the 90s, and China, it's in the 90s. Tends to be lower in Europe and Australia. Maybe that's something to do with, technical vocational education being a little bit more integrated into that education system. But any way you look at it, key skills is a threat. So what skills are we specifically talking about that are so difficult to source? Obviously, when you look at talent, things like digital literacy are really important, and technical skills obviously very important, though the shelf life of technical skills is getting shorter and shorter as the technology changes faster and faster. But what consistently comes up is that it's the 21st century skills or transferable skills that are the things that are most in demand and the biggest factor in hiring at the moment. So these are the soft skills that we know are actually kind of quite hard, hard to measure, somewhat hard to teach as well. But they're the skills that make us uniquely human. So communication, collaboration, creativity, things like that. And then within those soft skills, which soft skills kind of come up most often as being most critical? And it's kind of communication. It comes up again and again and again. And maybe it's quite obvious why that's the case. It's the most essentially human characteristic, I guess, like that need we have to connect, to interact. It's at the core of who we are as a species. And then you have communication, and then effective communication, impactful, meaningful communication. Isn't that what we live for? Isn't that what makes us tick? We know that isn't always easy. We all have families, we've got friends who we love. Sometimes it's difficult to communicate with them. It takes time and effort and understanding. But I really think it's the thing that, you know, makes life worth living. And it's equally true, I believe, in our working lives. So this idea of effective communication, I think, is really the key, and it's at the heart of what we want to cover today. And what I want to show you is that when we're talking about soft skills, English underpins all of those competencies. They can all funnel through English, they can be developed, enhanced in the process of language acquisition. So if you think about the skills needed to learn and master a language, self-discipline, time management, resilience, grit, self-determination. Yes, these are all things you could say are true of learning any skill. But language mastery requires social interaction, human interaction. It requires collaboration, and team working. And the very process of communication requires at least two people, right? You know, someone says something, someone's going to listen and decode that and think about that and recode that and formulate a response. And then you have all those non-verbal signs as well. So, you know, thinking about the previous slide, cross-cultural communication. So this idea of cultural awareness comes into play when we're talking about soft skills, but to a greater or lesser extent, I feel they are honed in the process of language learning. And of course, it doesn't have to be English, right? But English as the international language of business and of research and of the internet, it sort of allows you to scale up the impact of the skills that people need to be employable. So I'm going to hand over to Bridget now, who's going to share an example of how this context is influencing learning approaches in Italy.
Okay.
Do we have the technology to switch?
Nice. Here we go. Hopefully, I'll put that. Oh, it's gone right back to the beginning. So let's just scroll through. Sorry about that. I had queued it up to go straight in. Here we go. So thanks for giving a global context on this, Stuart. I was asked to give a view from Italy because we just have in the past year done a piece of research on employability. The scenario that we were facing when we started this research in 2020 can be summed up with the points that you see on the slide here. So basically, there are major transversal and international processes at work that are greatly influencing the labour market and triggering all kinds of changes across professions, skills required and the workplace. And that in a sense has only been worsened at an international level since the global pandemic. But what we have been facing in Italy for some time is not just a mismatch between what students are leaving schools with in terms of core competencies and the difficulties then of matching the skills they have with what employers are requiring. And therefore that goes back to the point that you were making earlier, Stuart, from the global research, the OECD research of the greatest big business threat is not having the skills necessary to take businesses forward. But we've actually here reached a situation of structural disemployability, which is sort of a step on from that again. So what we did in our research was to partner with Ernst & Young and Manpower, and we set ourselves the objective through an innovative forecasting method in this research to predict what kinds of skills would be required for the evolving job market in the next decade. And that revealed some very interesting information for us. I think not least that 80% of professions were destined to evolve, change, and potentially grow. And that is certainly true of the IT sector, as you can imagine, but not only. Sectors that are due to decline in some way are the more manual physical labor, as you may expect. But what these changes in jobs really revealed in this predictive study was the way in which jobs in the future won't necessarily be sort of substituted by new jobs in technology, but that we fully expect there to be an evolution of job types. So hybridization of two different job families coming into one, detachments of certain professions, or the coming together of others, so to speak. So it's a very dynamic trend, but what we expect to see across all that evolution is really a requirement for a core set of competencies that in some way will help our students future improve their employability chances going forward. And that's what we're interested in. So what we've looked at from the research that we've done is what we call future-proof skills, or the core competencies, or as we tend to use in maybe more informal language, the soft skills. So what I wanted to do before having a look at business partner was to really have a look at some of the key skills within this range of core competencies, and how they are very sort of easy in a way to insert into our language teaching, and how we can start to think about that to ensure that we are giving our students an opportunity to bridge the learning that takes place in the classroom to what is actually then required in the workplace. So we've categorized the skills into different core competencies. So you've got basic skills, you've got social skills, you've got problem solving skills. And in this particular case, we've looked at active listening, adaptability, and the ability to solve complex problems. And then we've looked at a couple of other social and basic skills, so understanding others and active learning. So what I would like to do now is to show you how business partner really gives you a superb context for ensuring that you are bringing that kind of teaching into your classroom, and in a sense helping students to make themselves more employable as they finish a course of study with you. So before we do that, I'd just like to launch a quick poll on your views on employability. Stuart, I'm not sure if you're able to launch the poll with the second question. Okay.
I've just launched the poll. And we've got 306 people looking at it, and we just hit the 100 mark. That's great. 150.
Halfway there.
We'll give you a few more seconds. Yeah, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna end that and then share it with you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got we agree there. So I think a fairly clear message, and if not strongly agree. So I think we're at 98% with that. So thank you. If you could close that down.
Okay.
Down my screen as well. And we'll dive in and have a look at how business partner can help to give you a context to bring this into your teaching. So for those of you who don't know business partner, this is an 8-level business English course recently published by Pearson. It takes students from an A1 level through to a C1, and underpinning the syllabus of every level of business partner are the learning objectives from the professional English descriptors within the global scale of English. And if you'd like to know more about that, you'll find that information on the Business Partner website, which we will share resources with you in a summer camp's rucksack full of information for you to take away at the end of this series. So more to come on that. But this course has really been designed and has a very clear objective, as I've referenced a few minutes ago, to help students bridge that learning experience and take what they've learned in your classroom with their communication skills and really give them the chance to apply that in a business context. So we're working both on communication skills and business skills so that the lesson or the activity doesn't become an end in itself just to complete that unit of work, but it is actually helping the students, if you like, build a toolkit of competencies and the core competencies that we're talking about. So the ability to listen actively, the ability to problem solve, the ability to understand and think about the actions and why people react in a certain way and how they communicate, and to take that into the workplace. So let's have a look at some concrete examples. This has been taken from the contents page of the B1 level, and the way in which the course is organised, yes, it's organised in units, but it has very flexible structure. So you're in no way obliged to do the units in order. It does give you a tremendous amount of flexibility to pick certain units if they're areas that interest you most. And this is really because teaching business English can be so varied. So course length can also kind of vary hugely from one place to another. And the way in which the course is structured is designed to really give you maximum flexibility. But within the contents page, you will always see that lessons 0.3 and 0.4 of a unit are what allows you to develop those soft skills. So we work first on building the English skills, the communication skills. And once the students have their own toolkit, if you like, of those skills, they are then applied in a business skills lesson where they're putting that core competence into practice. So let's have a look at a concrete example from this particular unit then. And here we're looking at active listening. So paying full attention to what others say, trying to understand key points and asking questions at the right time so as to avoid inappropriate interruptions. And the way in which we look at this in Business Partner is firstly that the lesson outcome is very clearly linked to that. So here we're looking at approaches to managing conversation and developing active listening skills and the ability to signal a change or respond to the person with whom you're working with is a way to put that active listening into practice. And the way that is done is through what we call staged videos. So there are two video strands within Business Partner. You have what we call stage videos, and this is really designed to help students see the communicative skills in a context, to see the sample sentences, the sample phrases that can be useful for managing those situations in a context. And they are asked generally to compare two scenarios. So you have two stage videos, one which is taking one approach, and in this case, because we're looking at managing a conversation, Beata, the company representative, is taking an approach of interrupting the client. And in the second video, she's taking an approach of going with the flow, and students are asked to look at both of these and decide which one they think is the best approach. What you then get beyond the staged approach is an authentic video with a business professional who will give a commentary on which approach works best, or what the pros are of one approach compared to the other. So you have both that staged approach and an authentic English approach. So students both can see the language in context and being practiced by the characters in the scenarios. And then you get somebody who is a business expert reflecting on the use of the soft skills and which was a better approach according to the expert. What students then are invited to do is to work on functional language opportunities. So in this case, changing the subject and staying on track, because it's about managing a conversation. But if we go back to that soft skill, also with that background idea of interrupting at an appropriate time rather than an inappropriate time, so that we have that empathy that we continue to have with the customer in this case. And once they've worked on the functional language, they are then guided towards a task where they put that into practice themselves. So in this case, you've got a scenario where you will need to decide who will be the supplier, who will be the client, and look at how to manage a conversation between the two. So you've got a group of 3 people working on a task like this. They're given their scenarios to work on, and then they're putting into practice the functional language that they've worked on, very much designed to put that active listening and understanding. When is a good time to just go with the flow? When is a good time to try and regain control of the conversation? So that soft skill of active listening is put into practice in a very concrete way. Another soft skill that we looked at in Business Partner, this also in the intermediate level, the B1 level, is adaptability. So the ability to coordinate one's actions with those of other people. And this is a business skills lesson rather than a communicative skills lesson. And so we're building on from that active listening that we looked at previously, and now looking at how to build consensus and work with other people, in this particular case in a business meeting. So again, we start with communication skills. So we're looking at the functional language of reaching agreement, and you've got examples of that in this particular dialogue that you see here. And then you have a task to put that into practice. So again, a real life context, a real life work context, where you're going to put into practice the managing of a conversation and working together and coming together with your ideas. The other thing I wanted to flag with the business skills lessons is there's always a self-assessment piece at the end after the task. And what that does is takes the student back to the My English lab, where there is a grid for students to self-assess their performance in that task. And you then have guidelines that will take you back to the course book if you feel you need extra work. We'll look at one final example, and that's looking at social skills, so adaptability and understanding others. In this case, understanding other people's reactions and the reasons behind their actions. This example has been taken from the B2 level. Just a point at this stage to mention that as Business Partner goes from A1 through to a C1 level, we do still have the communication skills, business skills, workplace skills actually at the A1 and A2 level. So these kinds of tasks are not something that you just find from a B1 level upwards. We've really tried to ensure that that has been worked into the course right from day one. So you're right from day one building those core competencies with students. In this particular case, you've got a lesson outcome that is based on being aware of different ways to work in teams. There's a lead-in activity here to look at the different styles of working together, either a hierarchical style or a more collaborative style maybe. And I think this is an interesting one as we see more and more organizations go to what are termed as flat structures, if you like. More and more often people working in the corporate world now find themselves working across departments, and certainly not in such a hierarchical style. Again, you have this activity that we saw at the B1 level as well, where you've got 2-stage videos with 2 different approaches to working together, to working in a team. In the first video, there is an expert role approach to managing the team. In the second video, there's a collective responsibility approach. So we're giving that awareness of different styles of working together. We build again on the functional language that allows you to work across teams and ensure that you can contribute ideas, you can develop ideas, you can agree, you can disagree. And as you work through the business skills lesson of this unit, you also then start to use a range of phrases to manage meetings. There's a way to classify those different phrases that you can use in a meeting to ensure that you are working together collaboratively. So you've got referring to agreement or disagreement in a meeting, managing how long people speak for during a team meeting, referring to follow-up actions and summarizing and closing. And then again, you're into a task. And in this case, you've got a task of managing a meeting with colleagues. And once again, you have that self-assessment piece. So it does encourage students to become reflective practitioners of the soft skills that we are teaching them. This is an example of the assessment grid in my English lab. So in this particular instance, it relates to what we've just seen, discussions in meetings. Students can self-assess themselves. There's a scale of points they can attribute to themselves. And if they feel more work is needed, then they have guidance of where to go back to in the course book or where to go in the workbook, just to maybe try it again or to consolidate their learning. And I'll hand back to Stuart.
Thank you. There is a poll actually I wanted to just ask, so I'm just going to launch it now. And this was sort of connected to the previous question we asked, which was, how important do you think employability is and English's role in that? And this question is really asking you, given the majority agree that it's super important, how much kind of emphasis do you put on it in the way you approach language teaching today? So kind of interested just to see whether, it's so important that you're putting it into practice in the way that you teach, or whether it's something you find that it's still a little challenging and you need support with. I'm really a long answer to Maria Erakova around the difference between level and Versant test, but maybe that will be self-explanatory in this next part of the session. So I'm going to end the poll there and share that. Okay. So still, obviously, the majority of you are kind of already factoring in employability in the way that you approach teaching English, which is fantastic. Okay, so let me share my screen again. To find it in there. Digital literacy is clearly not a strong soft skill for me. So we've been talking a little bit about how you can teach communication skills through Business Partner. Now we're going to look at an assessment tool that you can use to measure communication skills, and that tool is called Versant. I can see from the chat some of you are familiar with Versant, but if you've not come across Versant before, please do check it out. It's one of the most awesome assessment tools, both within Pearson, but I think in the language testing market more generally. In summary, it's a suite of tests. It's not just one test. There are several different tests. There's a 4 skills test. There are 1 skills tests. There are speaking tests, writing tests, business tests, academic tests. But it's a suite of tests that, and the unique thing about it is that it's really focusing on measuring facility in spoken and written English. And that means, to what extent can someone understand and respond appropriately and intelligibly at a natural pace in English. So unlike things like the level test, which has, a degree of adaptiveness, a degree of traditional item types, like MCQs and things like that, very familiar to most people who take tests, whether they're English tests or other tests. Versant is very much about production, much more than it's about reception. We obviously do measure receptive skills, but we measure them in the context of production. So, I listened, as I said earlier, I listen to something, I decode what you say into my own native language. I consider what the right response to what I heard might be, and I recode it back into my second language, in English, and I produce. And how long does that take? How automatic is that process? And how accurately can I and appropriately can I respond? So that's what it's measuring. And it's used in a really wide variety of contexts. I always think of Versant as a high flex test. So you can use it to screen for enrollment. You can use it to place. You can use it to benchmark and evaluate language proficiency at scale. You can use it to exit test. In the corporate world, where we do a lot of Versant testing, it's predominantly used for screening into jobs, or used in learning and development. So screening onto career progression programs, or in a language context, measuring the efficacy of a training intervention in terms of like pre and post testing. One of the cool things about it is that it's so flexible. You can take it anytime and anywhere. You can do it online, offline. You can do it in the classroom. Students can do it at home. You can distribute it by email to your test takers, or you can do it completely anonymously through test codes. If identity security is a concern or a factor in your thinking, we have remote monitoring as an optional function or feature. It's aligned to everything that Pearson does in English. So it's aligned to the global scale of English. So when you're looking at business partner or market lead, or whichever Pearson course where you're looking at, you're thinking always CEFAR in terms of 10 to 90 and what that granularity looks like as progress. And you can use Versant to measure course agnostically what that progress, how that progress is tracking. I say course agnostically because it's an important consideration when you're thinking about, business partner. Business partner has tests within it, but they're testing how well, someone is using the constructs that are taught in business partner, or how well they've understood concepts in business partner. And what's really nice about Versant is it's course agnostic. So it's okay. So you may have been on business partner or market lead or some other course, or no course at all, but Versant will take a very unvarnished view or impartial view of what someone's proficiency looks like at a point in time. It doesn't really matter what course people are doing. The important thing is, can you apply your English skills in a real world context? And thinking back to, what we talked about at the beginning, what employers are looking for, that's what they're looking for. Can you apply your English skills in a real world context? Another unique thing about Versant that sets it apart from many other language tests is it's 100% machine learning, big data. So there's no human intervention in the scoring. Obviously, There's a lot of humans involved in training the scoring engine and building the algorithms and making sure that the results are accurate and reliable. But the actual scoring itself is purely AI, and there are so many benefits to us because of that. The one that always, comes first for me is speed. It means that you get test results near instantaneously, and your students can get test results near instantaneously, even for speaking skills, even for writing skills, for the production skills. We're not relying on human raters and standardization and time and delay. Secondly, because it's a computer scored test, we're able to collect huge amounts of data points on the quality of their production, or the quality of their interaction in the item types. And that means you get very detailed diagnostics that students can use to see how they can improve. You can use to see where weaknesses are and what kind of interventions you might make, or how you might adapt your approach to certain particular learners or particular cohorts. Last thing I'd say about it that's really useful in the context of this conversation is it's mapped into business partner. So if you are teaching with business partner, you can select that course when you run the score reports. So you can see, okay, here is a weakness with the student. They need to do, focus on a certain grammar point at a certain level in their writing skills. And to teach that particular skill at that particular level, you would go to page 3, activity 7 of business partner, B1 level or something. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. The other thing to call out here is we have lots of different Versant tests. I'm just going to talk a little bit now about the Versant Professional English test, which is a 4 skills test of professional English. So when we're talking about professional English, we're talking about sort of the kind of English that you would find in everyday and common workplace scenarios. So it's not very industry specific or niche or anything like that. These are kind of pretty common everyday scenarios that are sort of generic, but do have a very clear workplace context or flavor. An example. So this is an item type for email writing. And you can see in this example, imagine you are working in a company and you need to write an email to your boss, talking about how you might approach the training of some new team members. So quite a challenging task if you've got no idea around what the world of work might look like and what an appropriate tone of voice would sound like in the workplace. But these are things we would be expecting you to be teaching in a business English program or a professional English program. And certainly if you're using something like business partner, for sure, this is very, very close context. Another example, speaking situation. So you would have an item prompt, something like you borrowed a laptop from the office, however, you spilled coffee on it and now it doesn't work. You need to call Nikki in HR and explain the situation. What would you say to her? You may blame this on the kids or on your partner. But it's a free, open response. It's not constrained to multiple choice questions or anything like that, where you've got a 25% chance of getting the right answer. This is free response, open response, but we still are able, with the technology we have, to score this using algorithms accurately. And this is what you get minutes after the test has been completed. You get a very detailed 3 or 4 page report. You get a description of a candidate's overall language ability. You get that in terms of the global scale of English. You get that in terms of the CEFAR half band. You get a visualization of proficiency across the sub-skills, obviously speaking, listening, reading, writing. And one of the nice things about this is that you can add name capture. So if you can do this anonymous as well, but if you want to capture your student names, you can do. If you want to co-brand and put your institution's names on the certificates to, you know, kind of really bring your institution closer, I guess, to what the work that Pearson does and the overall outcomes we're trying to drive towards, you can do that. It's really, really very flexible. This is an example of how we look at the different sub-skills. So let me zoom in actually on this one. So if we look at the speaking description specifically, this is what a learner can do with their speaking skills at the moment. And this is what it means numerically in terms of global scale of English and the CEFAR half band. And this is what a learner can do to improve their skills from the level they're at up to the next, you know, 2 or 3 GSE points, for example. And if you are teaching business partner, you can report and show exactly where you might find activities that would help you to teach those areas with the student. Market leader, and I've seen a few questions on market leader. Don't worry, market leader is also mapped as well. So if you're teaching market leader, you can still use this. We do have other Versant tests. Some of you may be familiar with the Versant English placement test, which is a more general English or academic English 4 skills test. That's mapped into more general English courses like the Speak Out and Roadmap and things like that. Okay, so I just already explained that one, so let me move on. Another nice feature is that you can use certification to motivate, I guess, and to recognize and reward student achievement. Again, name capture, co-brand is all possible as well. And one of the things we're looking at is how we can make this digitally badged so that people can stick it on their social media profiles and things like that. So I think I've mentioned that you know, Versant is a pretty unique test within our portfolio, and we're super proud of it. Another thing that makes it unique is that it's used across lots of different customer types and use cases. So we have a lot of great brands in universities using this for a range of different purposes, many of which are, you know, enrollment screening onto degree programs and things like that, as well as benchmarking progress within their language courses that they're running. But we also work with some really large companies globally as well, where we're using things like the Versant speaking test or the Versant writing test to screen into job roles. I'm going to give you a super quick case study here. You can click on this. We'll share the slides afterwards, so you can click and look at this in more detail. But it might be interesting to know that we have put Business Partner and Versant together quite successfully with a number of institutions and private language schools around the world. This is an example from Japan. They've got a really unique business model here that's sort of focused on personal trainer style approach to learning. So they expect very committed learners to the point where learners are paying, you know, thousands of dollars for like a 12-month commitment. And what they get in return is that kind of close coaching style and a learning consultant and like a learning personal trainer for English, and a sort of all-you-can-eat approach to interaction with other language learners. And what they do is they use Versant as a way to measure where someone is at the very beginning of a program, and then on a monthly basis, measure what kind of change they're seeing in proficiency gain. And again, you know, the consultants will be using the results from the Versant test to work with the various teachers that are involved with the student in personalizing their learning journey. And it's actually led to like some really interesting outcomes. One, you know, is that you do see some interesting patterns. We've got over 25,000 test case history just with this one client. So you can see at a macro scale, actually, you know, there is a big leap from their first test to their second test as they become more familiar with the look and feel of this assessment. And then you get like a consistently, you know, an increase in proficiency, but then you often get a sort of a plateau. And I think the chief executive calls it the valley of death, like when they get to month 9, where they're really starting to, you know, flag a little bit. And then a final push towards the end of the course. What they see is very, very good, you know, in, language gains, say 39% on average over the 12 months, but the retention rate is extremely high. So they have a very, very high quality experience, and they get the evidence that this language intervention is working for them, and they use Versant to provide that evidence. So an interesting case study, perhaps. Last thing I just want to share with you, got a few minutes left before we go into some questions, is when you think about what an effective language learning you know, pathway looks like. You know, just at its simplest, it's about setting goals with the learner, working with them to identify which classes they should be going in and what their goals are for the program they're in. Then you're applying the learning, and then you're layering on this assessment. It can be formative assessment, it can be summative assessment, loads of different assessment tools available to you. But it's a cycle, and that may be going on for a month or 3 months or 2 years, depends on each program. But ultimately you want to know at the end, based on how you're tracking on that measurement and learning cycle, were the goals met at the end of the learning program? It's kind of pretty simple, straightforward view of this. What I wanted to do is layer on some of the solutions we're talking about in terms of communication skills training and tools. So here you would be using a tool like Versant to measure and place alongside the consultation with learning goals, which is very much in the example I just shared is how they do that. You would use a tool like Business Partner or Market Leader to go through the learning cycle. You can use Versant as a course agnostic benchmarking test to measure progress, but obviously there's a ton of other assessment tools you can use as well more regularly, like you know, you could do you obviously using the assessment tools that are within Business Partner. And then finally, you can use Versant as an exit test as well. But equally, you could use, you know, other third-party tests that are out there. Depends how high stakes or formal that endpoint certification needs to be. Depends on your own context. But for the tools we shared, they all work together in that way, and they're all underpinned by that common framework that we have with Global Scale of English. So I've got one poll that I'm just going to share here. So that poll is, given what we just talked about, would you like to try a free AI scored Versant Professional English test? If the answer is yes, do stick your hand up, and we're happy to share a test code with you. It's a 60-minute test. And I think the majority of people on this call are going to be, you know, high proficiency users So I'll send you the hard version of the Versant Professional English Test. And that's all the questions, all the polls we had. So I'll open it up for questions. And Sophia, if there's any questions you want to pitch, and we'll have a go at answering them.
Hi there. Yes, so we've had lots of questions coming in throughout your talk. Thank you for that. Thank you to both of you. So is there anything in Versant for students to gain interviewing business skills? Yeah, can you talk to that at all? How they can specifically prepare for business, for interviews for jobs?
So, Versant is not like a prep course. It's just measuring somebody's proficiency at a point in time in a particular context. And that context is a fairly general workplace scenarios. So I don't know, it's an item banked test, so I don't know what all of the item types look like, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a context around interviews and CV writing and things like that. That being said, there are specific, particularly on CV writing, for example, there are specific skills and ways of expressing yourself that you only come across in CVs that would make it, inappropriate for a broader business English test, I guess. Regards test prep itself for Versant, I would say that there is, and we'll put this in the pack that we send out to you guys, there is a whole range of test prep materials for Versant so that test takers can feel familiarized with the look and the feel of the tests before they actually take a real test. And I think that is super important. You wouldn't take a driving test without knowing what the questions look and feel like. So, we shouldn't be expecting learners to be taking English tests in the same way. So we do have a pretty nice surround ecosystem for Versant test prep, and we'll share some information on that.
That's brilliant. On Business Partner, does Business Partner teach soft skills at the lower levels of the GSE?
Yeah, so whereas we've seen examples today from the B1 and B2 level, and we have the communication skills and the business skills lessons, at the lower levels, they're called workplace skills. So we still absolutely try and build in those soft skills, even at the lower levels, yes.
That's brilliant, thank you. And what would be your suggestion for managing pair work or group work if you're teaching online?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I think many of us now are teaching online, and I would expect that to continue for some time. So obviously using a conferencing tool that allows you to have breakout rooms is a really useful tool from that point of view. Failing that, I think it's also about how you manage the work that you do synchronously in the online lesson and what you can do asynchronously, i.e. get students to prepare up front. Because I think one of the things to avoid in an online lesson is a lot of downtime where students are just reading off the page or reading off the screen, because that in some way can power down the pace of the lesson. So I guess there's a couple of approaches you could take there.
Fantastic, thank you. Here's a question about VET. What is vocational English teaching? Can you explain briefly?
What is vocational? Well, I wonder if the question is what is VET as in the Versant test? We have a Versant test called VET, and that's Versant English test, which is confusingly a speaking test. I mean, it's a speaking test only, and we call that Versant English test, or VET. What is vocational English teaching? Was that definitely the question?
It was the question, but I think you're right. I think it's a reference to the Versant English test.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. A question about some students, this may be something that you have opinions on. Some students are very knowledgeable and educated and score or do very well in their English education, but when it comes to communication with others, that's actually they're not very effective at real life communication. Can you explain why this is, and maybe how Versant can catch that and make sure that whoever's scoring well in this test is actually able to use their English in real life situations?
Well, what I can say is the research that we've done over, we've been running Versant, and in the case of Versant English test, that was sort of the first test, the speaking test that we ever did. That's been around for about 25 years in various forms. And we've done lots of comparative studies with other tests. TOEIC is a common sort of test that is used in similar ways, for example. And what we found is there is a very, very high, let me twist it the other way around. What we say, somebody who scores very highly in a TOEIC test doesn't necessarily score highly in a Versant test. They might, but equally they might not. So there's not a very strong correlation between a high TOEIC score and a Versant score. However, the other way around, somebody who scores highly in Versant always scores highly in TOEIC, very highly in TOEIC. So, what we've found is it's actually it's a very accurate test of someone's genuine proficiency skills. There is one thing we could share, for those who are really interested in the science behind the test, we could share the validation study that looks at some of the comparative studies and the research around psycholinguistics and cognitive load and all that kind of stuff that allows us to say with confidence that these item types really are measuring someone's ability to produce intelligible English in real time, in real contexts.
That's great, thank you. I think we're at the top of the hour, just a couple of minutes over, in fact. So thank you both very much. That was a really great and thorough and clear and engaging talk. And thank you to everybody who joined as well from all over the world of your questions. Please do come to check out the rest of the programme, the Assessment Summer Camp programme. We'll send you a certificate of, there's the link right there. We'll send you a certificate of attendance by the end of this week, and the recording will be available as well. Please do also check out your resource rucksack. That's full of all sorts of free, wonderful resources, and that will be emailed to you as well. All right, so thank you again to everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.